I actually first came across her on TikTok. I think C-Love, you remember. I don't know if you remember, Maya, when I sent you a message, or I requested to join your live because you were debating somebody about the topic of abortion or something like that. And then I requested to join just to say, hey, can you come to one of our lives one day or something like that? So that was a while ago.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I haven't been live debating for a second because I kept getting banned, and so I was just kind of waiting it out. And so then I just started my second account, so hopefully I'll be able to go live again.
You were getting banned.
Yeah, so my main account actually got perm banned 3 times. So I just got it back July 4th, again after having it banned for like 3 weeks. So
why were they banning you?
Because they said it was because I was under the age of 13, but I know that that's a lie because I've sent in all of my information for like the computer fund. I'm 19.
Yeah, just making sure. We don't want a 13-year-old like on our live. I mean, not that there would be anything wrong with a 13-year-old coming on, but it was kind of weird.
We just need your mom to sit next to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff. Yeah. So for some reason they thought I was under the age of 13, so I sent in like verification of my age, and then they banned me again, and then I just kept messaging them, and then finally they were like, you have no violations on your account. Like, we'll give it back to you. And I was like, okay, sweet. But for some reason, I still have an account warning, so I had to go private on my main account.
Okay.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. TikTok's really coming after me.
So, just share a little bit of your background. You shared who you are, but just a little bit of like, obviously the topic tonight is the historic Roe v. Wade being overturned, and so we're going to be talking about abortion tonight. I don't know if that's going to trigger any words in the like algorithm or whatever, but we'll try to avoid that word as much as possible just in case. But you're very passionate about that topic. Can you tell us why, how you started getting passionate about that, and kind of like your origin story when it comes to this topic?
Yeah, so basically I had just hopped on TikTok, and it was like right after the election happened, so there was just like so much controversy and just like everyone was arguing with each other, and I decided to post a video in response to this woman who made a pro-choice video. And at the time, like I was pretty pro-life, and it wasn't like up until that year that I had like decided to be pro-life for myself. Like before I was like, oh, you know, like if a woman wants to get an abortion, like, oh, sorry, I said it. But if a woman wants to do that, then like, you know, she should be able to do that. But I'm not going to personally do that. And then up until like that year, I started discovering like videos about what the procedures are, what they look like. And so I was like, oh, like this is not okay. And there are so many people who don't actually know what this is and what it does. And so it's really important that we spread the word on it. So I started talking, even though I didn't really know much, like I was pretty uneducated on the topic, but I just started posting pro-life content and posting just stuff about like my opinion. And eventually, so I started in like November, December of 2020, and then March of 2021, I posted this really super hot pro-life take, and it just blew up. And then from there, I just kept moving forward. And then I got the opportunity to go to the March for Life this year, and I've gotten the opportunity to work contracted onto Live Action's TikTok team and be able to help like spread the word and like spread awareness just on the topic of, you know, pro-life versus pro-choice.
Wow, that's great. So you went to, this is your first time going to March for Life?
Yes, in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so when I was in high school, our high school class, like our whole school had the option to go every year. Oh, and I think I've been like 2 or 3 times when I was in high school.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I was homeschooled for high school because of COVID, so.
You said you had a hot take that kind of went viral. What was it?
So I was talking about how the right to life triumphs other rights. Basically, it's hold up, I'm not going to try to find it right now, but basically, I was like comparing, because you know how people are like, oh, if you don't like abortions, don't get one. So basically, that was what I was saying, and I was talking about how the right to life in the case of a pregnancy triumphs a woman's bodily autonomy, and of course, it went super viral, and like I had so many people duetting it. I had people who were duetting it go viral, and it was pretty crazy.
Wow.
Wow. So oh wow, I'm frozen. Okay.
Like, what the heck?
Oh, we're having these technical issues. There we go. I'm back. Okay. What were some of the points that you made that people kind of, you had to have made some point that people didn't really think about before or something?
Yeah, so in the terms of like, I feel like a lot of pro-choicers like to argue with like bodily autonomy, but I was just kind of explaining how it isn't really a valid argument when it comes to a woman who's pregnant because like our bodily autonomy only extends so far. So most pro-choicers would argue we have the 14th Amendment that protects our right to privacy and protects our right to get like medical care that we need, and we have bodily autonomy. We don't have to give our kidney to someone who needs a kidney, right? Have you heard those arguments before?
I haven't. I have
The
not.
interesting
That
to
actually
me,
sounds
like
like
I
a pretty good
personally
argument.
hear is like, oh, if someone, I can't be forced to give my kidney to someone, so therefore, like, I shouldn't be forced to be pregnant, right? But obviously, there's two completely different situations. So in this take, I was talking about how our bodily autonomy doesn't extend to intentionally harming others. And although in this case with like the kidney, where let's say someone's going to kidney failure and they need your kidney and like you're the perfect match for them, you wouldn't be forced to donate your kidney, but you also can't intentionally stab the person who needs a kidney. And I think people don't understand the difference because in an abortion, it's like an elective abortion and it intentionally ends the life of a child. Whereas in these other cases of bodily autonomy, it's an unfortunate circumstance, but still like your kidneys are made for your body, whereas your like a woman's uterus is made to like grow a child. So does that make sense? I feel like I'm going.
No, that makes really sense.
Okay, sweet. So basically that was kind of the argument that I was making, is that bodily autonomy doesn't apply in the same way that it would when a woman is pregnant. And so we can't use that argument to defend abortion because abortion intentionally ends the life of another innocent person.
Okay. So how and we'll get deeper into the biology, the spiritual side, the political side, and all this. But I just wanted to ask you, like, how long have you been researching all this stuff and really debating? Because you said you had a post that went viral. At that time, when were you as well versed in this as you are now, or how did you learn so much about?
Absolutely not. I honestly think that I was really prideful at the beginning of things, that I thought that I knew everything, but the more I started to do independent research, I realized I didn't actually know a lot. And so I started kind of doing independent research, and then I found like Live Action's page and like Students for Life and like different pro-life organizations that help educate on the topic. And so I started kind of taking their talking points and running with it until I was able to kind of make my own talking points and come up with like my own, I guess, debating points, you could say. So then I'm trying to remember when I first started going live. I want to say it was like last summer I started going live. Maybe it was in the fall. I'm not really. I think it was last summer. I started going live because I felt like I had enough like information that I could share. And my goal in going live and like debating is never to be like, oh, you're wrong, I'm right. But like when you have a debate, it really gets everyone watching thinking about what you're talking about. And so if I can sit in front of this screen and debate someone for 30 minutes, I'm getting these people who are watching to think about the topic of abortion for 30 minutes and being able to decide, okay, I want to do my own research on this topic. I'm not just going to believe the first thing I hear, but I want to listen to these two people in this discourse. So it really gets people to think about it. And I think that that's the most important thing about debating and educating, is just getting people to think, because the more they think about it, the more they'll want to form an opinion on it.
Right. And one thing I literally was speaking to somebody about the other day, I think I was talking to my dad about this, how some people are kind of like, well, keep your opinions to yourself, and people, they're smart enough to form their own opinions, right? But if the only voice they ever hear is the voice of this side, how are they going to form an accurate opinion? How are they going to come to a logical conclusion if their thought process is, well, this is the only argument I've ever heard. This is the only side that I've ever, been, shown or exposed to. And so when it comes to like the debates, a lot of times I've always said debates are not for that person. Debates are for the person listening. And so I think that, what you said really resonates with me, because a lot of people think, oh, you just like to argue, you just like this, you just like that. It's like, no, I just want people to have the option to hear a solid argument from both sides, so they can choose. Because if you've only heard a solid argument from one side, then you really don't have much of a choice. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard too when there's so much misinformation that's circling everywhere. Like as someone who is pro-life, and our goal is to educate on what, the procedure is and what it does and how it does end the life of an innocent child and how it is morally wrong. Like the conversation can be very skewed like in one direction because of how much misinformation is out on the topic. And it's really sad too because even like pro-abortion like OBGYNs and like doctors are spreading misinformation. Like I don't know, have you seen some of those, like some of the videos that have been circulating on TikTok or on Instagram right now because of Roe v. Wade? There's so much misinformation, but people are not willing to hear the other side out or even do research on their own. They just want to believe, the first thing that they hear, or they're like, oh, well, I kind of agree with what they say, so I'm going to fully agree with it. And I feel like that's where like a lot has gone wrong in our nation, is where we have failed to make opinions for ourselves. We just kind of believe the first thing that we hear.
Well, I think part of it too is because critical thinking is kind of out the window. A lot of people just want information really quick. How many times do you see on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or anything where a news article is shown, screenshot, just the title? And it's like, you got your information from the title. That's all you need. This is what's going on in the world. How many people actually click the link to read the full article to see what's actually going on? Not many people. So I don't even think that it's a conscious, like, I just want to believe this thing right here, right now. I think that it's an unconscious laziness that we've been kind of, accustomed to with this fast-paced, instant gratification society, to where it's like, oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's a good enough argument for me to make up my conclusions to how the world works, and so I'm going to go like that. And you can't operate that way and be a rational, logical human, And speaking of TikTok, we've been doing this lately where we get our guests to kind of react to and talk about a couple TikToks that we found on the topic. And we'd like to see your reaction on some of these TikToks too. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's great.
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. So we'll go ahead and start out with this one. All right. So let me know when you want me to pause it. Let me know when you want me to, like, hey, go back, whatever. Because, you're going to react to it. You let us know your thoughts. All right, ready?
One of my friends sent me the best analogy for the anxiety. So you're in a fertility clinic. The reason why it doesn't really matter. But the fire alarm goes off and you run for the exit. However, before you hit the exit, you hear a child screaming. You stop, you go to the door you hear it screaming from, you open it, and you see a 5-year-old child in the corner. In the other corner, you spot a frozen container of Bible.
Is it choppy?
Yeah, it's like lagging. I can't really hear what she's saying. I think I know the point she's trying to make, though.
Oh, it's lagging? Okay, hold on really quick. Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, so she's talking about like the kids versus
what's the point do you think she's making?
Yeah, so I think that she's trying to make a point.
So you've already heard this argument.
Yes, I have. I've heard this argument quite a few times, actually, especially doing live debates as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in this argument, she's talking about how, like, if a 4-year-old were in a fire versus a group of embryos, like, obviously you're going to pick the 4-year-old, right? And so it's kind of in the same way where, yes, we obviously put value on different things. Like, for example, if there's a random person in a fire versus my brother in a fire, I'm probably going to save my brother from the fire. But that doesn't necessarily mean that my brother has more value than this other person, right? They are humans. They're both equal. But that just means that I personally add more value to my brother rather than this random person that I don't know. So like in this case that she's giving, like the embryos versus the 4-year-old, obviously we're going to pick the 4-year-old over the embryos because, the 4-year-old maybe like looks like us. We can emotionally relate to the 4-year-old a little bit more than a group of embryos, but that doesn't mean that the embryos have less value than the 4-year-old, right? So in this case, like, we're giving human rights because of our humanity, not because the government or people gives it to us. So in this case, science says that life begins at conception. And so, yes, a child in the womb is alive. It is a human being. It has human rights, deserves to be protected, just like every other human being on this planet. But at the same time, me personally, obviously, I'm going to put more value on someone I can relate to rather than someone I cannot relate to. Does that make sense?
It makes
Makes
sense.
total sense.
It makes sense. Am I still lagging or am I good?
I think you're good.
Okay, cool. Let me make sure. Let me play a little clip of this to see if this is lagging as well.
One of my friends just sent me the best analogy for the anti thing, and I'm going to tell it to you. So you're in a fertility clinic. The reason
Was it good?
It's still pretty laggy.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Got you. Well, I'm going to try. I mean, I've been trying to disconnect all my devices.
Okay.
But anyway, sorry about that.
No worries.
But no,
I think
what
I would
you were
even come
saying-
at it a different.
Go ahead, Zach.
I said I would come at it a different way with the, house fire type thing, right? For me, the thing about this analogy is you're trading life for life. It's like, okay, there's a person here, a person there. You have to choose one person's going to die. If I don't have a choice to save everybody and one person is going to die regardless, I'm just choosing death. That's really, that's not really, it's not really a choice.
Mm-hmm.
One person's dying or another person's dying, whether it's an embryo, whether it's an old man, whether it's a baby. But when you're going in for an abortion, you're not choosing between one person or the other person. You're not stuck between, do I choose whether this baby lives or these embryos live? Like, no, you're choosing between, did the baby live or does it not?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I kind of don't really get this analogy of how it relates to abortion because,
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really relate to abortion in the way, but they like to use these types of arguments just to dehumanize a specific group of people, right? So they use this argument as in you don't care as much about, you don't care for an embryo as much as you care for a 4-year-old, right? But they're using it to dehumanize this group of people who are less developed than them when it doesn't actually have to do it doesn't have to relate to abortion at all, like in the argument that they're using. Obviously, when you choose to go in and have an elective abortion and you're intentionally ending the life of your child, you are choosing between life and death. But you're choosing life and death for someone else. It's not a choice that people should be making individually. Or I shouldn't have the choice between life or death for someone else, right? That shouldn't be up to me. I think that a lot of our generation and just people are kind of playing the role or trying to play the role of God and saying only these certain people deserve life, whereas these people, they're less developed, so they don't deserve life. And so I think that they use this argument to really dehumanize a group of people, but that doesn't make them any less valuable. They may look different, right? They're less developed, but that doesn't change the fact that they are human beings and they do deserve life.
Right. Zach, it kind of goes back to the argument you like to make with Black people in America. At one point, we were considered 3/5 of a human being, right?
Mm-hmm.
By some people. But does that make us actual 3/5 of a human being? No. We're all the same in God's eyes. So I think that kind of goes back to that whole argument.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Let's try and see if some of these other videos will load, because this is usually what gets the most of the conversation going. Man, I'm lagging again.
Okay, sorry, just a little technical difficulties. We're good.
Am I still lagging? Can you?
No, you're good right
hear me
now.
well, everything. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's just roll it. Let me know if you can't do it, if you can't see it. If not, we'll just keep going.
Devastated, terrified, because somebody was in God and and I wanted to dedicate this next song to the 5 members of the Supreme Court who showed us that At the end of the day, they truly don't give a shit about freedom. This protest to justice, Samuel Alito, Clarence Thomas, William Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh. We hate you.
I've seen
It
this.
was-
I think it's funny because when she did this, like she wasn't even in the US. I'm pretty sure she was in Europe on tour and she said this. So I was just kind of surprised that she would say that. And I don't think she understands how the Supreme Court actually works. And so, well, first, let me just say, the Supreme Court's job is to interpret and defend the Constitution, right? So they have determined that within the Constitution, there is no such thing as a constitutional right to abortion. It's just not there. And so in her comment, she made they don't care about freedom or anything like that. We actually do care a lot about freedom, and the Supreme Court actually does care a lot about freedom, and they care about what's in the Constitution. And so they have to analyze what's there, and their job is not to vote based on the popular opinion, right? They're not supposed to be doing that anyway. And I feel like there was so much pressure from everywhere when the Supreme Court draft was leaked. Like, you guys better not, overturn Roe v. Wade. But their job isn't to listen to those people. Their job is to actually determine what's in the Constitution, what's not in the Constitution. And I feel like so many people misunderstand that, abortion is not a constitutional right. It's not a right that's given to us. We cannot have a right that ends in intentionally ending the lives of over 63 plus million preborn babies since 1973. And then she goes on to make this point about, women are going to die, yada, yada, yada. That is so not true. That is just fear-mongering and misinformation. Each pro-life state has something called the trigger laws. So basically they have exceptions. The whole point is to get rid of elective abortion. And elective abortion is intentionally ending the life of your child. It's not if a mother were to have a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancy, those things, those are still going to be available for moms to get
Explain what those are to people who don't know.
So a miscarriage in an elective abortion, you are choosing to end the life of an alive, well baby in the womb. Let's say it's for financial reason, yada, yada, yada. Over 98% of abortions that happen in the United States are elective abortions. Just a mom doesn't want to have a baby yet. She doesn't feel like she's ready, financially unstable, just different things like that. Whereas in a miscarriage, this is a life-saving treatment where the child has already passed. The child has already died. So now what happens is that doctors have to go in and perform a procedure that removes the body of the child that is already dead. So basically, it's not the same thing. And I always like to word it like this too, is you do not go into a Planned Parenthood to get life-saving treatment. You will never go to a Planned Parenthood to get an ectopic pregnancy removed. And an ectopic pregnancy is when the egg, after fertilization, implants in the fallopian tubes. So basically, that child will not be able to survive growing the fallopian tubes. Not only that, it won't be able to survive, first off. And second off, it can be life-threatening to the mother. And so usually what happens is that doctors have to go in and perform a surgery to remove the tubes. My mom actually had to have that done, and it's completely different than having an elective abortion. And I think that's what people misunderstand, is that they're even called different medical procedures. I'm not exactly sure the names of those procedures, but I know it's completely different, and they wouldn't be labeled under an elective abortion or under an abortion. And so these women are terrified because, they won't be able to get life-saving treatment, but it's completely untrue. You don't go into any local Planned Parenthood or local abortion clinics to get this kind of treatment that you need after, the baby has planted in the fallopian tubes, or if the baby has already passed. You don't go get an elective abortion when those things happen.
So I've had people reach out to me and say, "Oh, I can't believe you're happy about Roe v. Wade being overturned, because did you know?" And specifically saying, "What if your wife got pregnant and the baby was in the fallopian tubes? She's not allowed to get it removed.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's just going to have to die." That's what this law is doing. Or that's what getting rid of Roe v. Wade is doing. That's the whole reason Roe v. Wade was there. And that's what they've said to me. And I'm sure someone told them that and someone else told them that. So what you're saying is that is not even an abortion.
That isn't an abortion, no. And even before Roe v. Wade was passed by this, or like put in place by the Supreme Court in 1973, women were still allowed to get this life-saving medical treatment that they needed. And it's completely different again, like I said before. But the whole like case for Roe v. Wade was this woman in Texas who wanted to have an abortion just because she wasn't ready to have a child. I'm pretty sure the story is like she wasn't financially stable. There's like a whole deal to it, and I've read through it multiple times. But it wasn't because her life was in danger. Roe v. Wade did not like make it legal per se for women to like get life-saving treatment. Before Roe v. Wade was even in place, women were still able to get this life-saving treatment that they need, and it's not the same thing as an elective abortion.
So essentially, the only thing they're not allowed to do now, that people aren't allowed to do, is to say, "Hey, it's just not the right time for me. I don't want another child," or this
My
doesn't
baby-
really look very good.
The man I had the child with ain't. So
What is-
I want to get rid of the baby.
Basically, yeah. So that's the whole goal, is to eliminate, elective abortion, which would just be people who, have unplanned pregnancies. And again, it's like, a lot of people say unwanted pregnancies, but I don't really feel like there's such thing, because there's never such thing as an unwanted child. And there's over 2 million families that are waiting to adopt. And yes, I do absolutely believe that we can reform the foster care system and improve, the way adoption works. But at the same time, there is no like ethical or like beneficial reason to end the life of your child. Like, there is always another way.
So there isn't a situation, and I just want to understand, because I want to have both sides. Like I want to really be clear. Like, is there a situation where, besides the fallopian tube thing, where a baby is, I don't know, third trimester, end of second, beginning of third trimester, the baby is ready to go? Is there a situation where the mom is just gonna need an abortion just because her life is in danger?
At that point, no. Because if you look at, so viability would be around 24 weeks, and with technology, it's getting earlier and earlier. Like, I'm pretty sure one of the most recent was 22 weeks that a baby survived outside of the womb. And so at that point, what could happen is doctors could, do an early delivery for a mother. So she doesn't actually have to deliver to full term. So if she were to have complications, during birth, or she had like another issue that would come up, there would never be a reason to terminate the life of her child. And Lila Rose actually was on live today with Lisa Bevere and was talking about this too, is that, pro-lifers stand with like, a woman can get the treatment that she needs while she is pregnant. There is no reason to kill the child and then treat the mother. You can always treat the mother with whatever's going on. And, if something were to go south, for example, you could do early deliveries, and there's so many other options. But it actually is pretty rare for women in the later trimesters to have more issues, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
I think you're muted, Zach.
Sorry about that. That's a different story than I've been hearing. This is literally the most like technical issues we've ever had, even on Instagram. But yeah, that's a different story than I've heard. Most of the stories I've heard is like, no, they're going to use this as an opportunity to force the moms who have a baby in their fallopian tube to just die.
No, because like, we're pro-life, and it isn't just for the child. Like, we are pro-mothers, we are pro-children, we are pro-fathers. It's not, being pro-life isn't about picking the baby over the mother. We can choose both of them and choose to support the mother and provide her with the resources and the care that she needs, and we can choose to support and care for the child. I feel like a lot of people look at it like, oh, it's one or the other, it's the baby or the mother, but it doesn't actually have to be that way. As we can choose to love them both regardless on the situation, as long as we're there to provide love and support.
So why is it that most people say, especially right now, like, oh, you care about the baby, but after the baby's born, you don't care. You don't care about the moms. You only care about the baby. Why? Where are people coming to that like conclusion from?
Honestly, it is really frustrating to hear that from people, because pro-lifers actually do the most out of any like community to support moms. Like if you look at, you know, how many pregnancy resource centers there are, and they outnumber Planned Parenthoods in every single community, as well as seeing like, you know, what churches do to provide free resources for women. Like most people want women to believe that it's easier for you to walk into a Planned Parenthood and have an abortion than it is to walk down to a pregnancy resource center and get free diapers and free car seats and, you know, free resources that you need. And I just feel like there's so much misinformation about, you know, what pro-lifers are actually doing. And I really have seen so many people that I know personally stepping up to get involved and to make a difference, because obviously, you know, we are pro-life. We want those babies to be born and to be loved, right? But that doesn't just stop right when they're born. We want to be able to help moms who need help, and we want to be able to help families who need help. It's not just about, oh, you have to have this baby and like that's it. No, like we want to provide the love and support that you need. And like evangelicals, I actually believe are the ones who do the most. I feel like it's like 2% of evangelicals, which is like the highest amount of like a marginalized community. I'm pretty sure I mispronounced that. Like
we
community.
had, I don't know if you know who Ruslan is. We had him on a couple weeks ago, and he shared a stat that evangelical Christians actually, or Christians in general, actually share. They take in twice as many adopted children as like the rest of the population.
Yeah, and I believe that the percent is actually going up.
Same thing with even just giving to the poor and single moms and things like that. So it makes sense what you're saying. I just don't understand why that argument. I guess
because we have a culture that is very pro-abortion, and rather than people providing like other alternatives than abortion, it's easier for them to just say, oh, you know, go get an abortion. And, you know, think about all these big corporations. I don't know if you've seen like Dick's Sporting Goods and like I think it was Amazon and a couple other like big corporations are paying now for women to go have an abortion, you know, and pay to like, you know, give them like a stipend basically to go have an abortion, because it's cheaper for them to pay for a woman to have an abortion and to keep her working for the next 10, 20 years than it is to pay for her maternity leave and to help support her as a mom. So in the long run, a lot of these corporations that are like spreading this misinformation about how pro-lifers don't do anything and how, you know, nothing's helping, like we are only pro-birth, like a lot of these people are just in it for themselves and in it for money and in it to be able to control people as well. Like so many women don't understand that like these corporations are profiting off their abortions, you know? So it's like there's a lot that goes into that.
It's deep. I kind of want to know, what is your opinion on the whole well, what if she's raped argument?
Yeah. So that's a pretty common argument that we hear. And rape is like a terrible thing. And obviously like anyone who partakes in that should like go to jail and should receive like the sentence that they deserve. And I absolutely like fully believe that. But I don't think that abortion solves the issue of rape, and it hasn't for the past 50 years while it's been around. I feel like in the sense of, you know, this situation where a woman has been traumatized because she's been abused or she's been hurt, like abortion only adds more hurt on top of what she's already been through. And there's all this pressure to get an abortion in this circumstance. But regardless on how a child is created, they still deserve to be loved and they're still valued, and they aren't less valuable because of the sins of their father. Like we in this nation, we don't judge children based on what their parents do, right? You know, we're not going to say, oh, your father did this, so this is the punishment that you get for what your father did. No, that's not how we work as a nation. That's not how it works, you know, anymore, especially under the new covenant that we have in Christ. Like we're not punished for the sins of our father. And so I think that in this case, a woman needs to be treated with love and be treated and get the healing that she needs and the resources that she needs. She needs a community of people to surround her, to support her and what she's been through, because abortion does not solve rape. It doesn't undo what has happened to a woman. And it doesn't heal her.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to try and see if these next two videos will run smooth.
And also, like, if you have questions, like if you know basically what the video says, you can feel free to like question me on those.
Yeah.
Unless I've seen them. I've seen like a lot of these because I have to do at them for basically my job. So.
Really?
Yeah.
That seems like such a cool job to have.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I like it.
Okay, so you've probably already seen all these then.
Most
Okay,
of
let's
them.
see.
Like all of the ones that are like on the top when you search up Roe v. Wade, basically to the bottom. But
Okay, let's see. Let's see about this one. Have you seen this one?
I don't know.
Is this familiar? Okay. All right. Let's play it. Let's see what
Maybe if
happens.
we all mute our mics and then there won't be an echo. Do you want to try
Yeah.
that?
Now that Roe versus Wade has been overturned, what are my options? Oh, you're gonna have to have it. Yeah, no exceptions. Thank you. I'm 12. Yeah. I'm just a kid. Yeah, well, that thing in there is more important to us. Sorry. Where can I go? Well, we're in Tennessee, so California? I can't drive. And even if I could, it's the gas prices. Yeah, that's not really our problem. Okay, well, what if I go over to one of the states that will let me? Yeah, you can do that, but you're gonna get sued by that person and, their family members. Again, I'm 12. Yeah, well, shouldn't have done the dirty. I was...
Do you want to pause it? Okay, great. So I think I've seen part of this video before and like what she talks about. And so many people misunderstand this. And like in the same way, again, like a 12-year-old would also be considered a child. And again, like this is a very, very rare case, and we shouldn't make things legal because of rare cases again. But I know that women who do experience this, like obviously they deserve like the love and the support and the resources that they need. Again, abortion isn't going to solve this issue. And I think what she forgets is that with Roe v. Wade being overturned, abortion is not going to be illegal in every single state, right? That the decision goes down to the states for them to be able to decide, oh, we're going to keep abortion legal until, 8 weeks, until whatever, until there's a heartbeat, different things like that. And so in this kind of hypothetical like argument that she's giving, she's not actually making the other options clear. She's making it sound like, oh, you're pro-life, like you're just pro-birth, like you don't actually care about this woman who's going through this, who's experiencing this. Whereas it's actually completely the opposite. And she was saying like she's in Tennessee, and I feel like Tennessee would be the place where there is actually those like communities there to support those women who are going through that. Like again, abortion does not solve any of these societal issues that we're facing. We need to surround these women with the love, support, and the community that they need to move forward and to feel confident in being moms. And again, she's saying like a 12-year-old, which is like extremely, extremely rare. But at the same time, I would say that a 12-year-old is also a child. And in that case, whereas the doctors could try to perform an early delivery, like super duper early, and there's a chance that the baby may not survive, but we're still trying to preserve the life of the child and the mom. And so in this case, we're not doing an elective abortion intentionally ending the life of the child. We're trying to save the child, but also try to save the mother at the same time.
Okay, you probably broke down her whole argument. I don't even know. I mean, you may keep going. We'll keep it going, just see what happens. I think all I have to do is mute my mic.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
She made the point. She was like, said something about getting sued or something like that. And I heard people saying like, if you try to go to another state and get the abortion, you'll be put in jail or something like that. Is that true, or is that just?
It's not. A lot of the pro-life laws are penalizing the people who perform abortions, like abortionists and like I guess like OBGYNs who perform abortions, rather than actually penalizing the women who get abortions. So it's not illegal to cross state lines to get an abortion, although like obviously we don't want that to be happening. Women will not be getting sued if they travel across state lines to get an abortion. Because I mean, if that was true, then all these big corporations wouldn't be paying for women to travel across state lines to get their abortions.
Oh yeah, because they'd be liable. They would get sued.
Yep.
All right.
Okay, let's keep it rolling.
Also, birth control access will be a lot more limited. Formula is short, and we actually have a shortage on feminine products as well. So prepare for that. Don't forget, you will also be prosecuted when you come back to your home state. Okay, well, is the government at least going to pay for the hospital bills or housing or food or supplies or any kind of medical care? Yeah, no. Yeah. Nope, not at all. So how am I supposed to pay for it? Well, you can get a job, but it only pays $7.25. That's nowhere near enough for a child. Yeah, well, you're gonna have to make do. Now that Roe versus Wade.
Okay, supply chain issues do not give us like a yes to kill people. That just doesn't make sense to me. Why she's like, oh, there's a shortage of this and there's a shortage of this. Yeah, there's a shortage of a lot of things, and we don't choose to kill people who are in need of things, right? We try to provide them with the support and they need, and there's obviously not much that pro-lifers can do about a supply chain problem. Like I can't like call up Joe Biden and be like, yo, get your people in order. Like I wish I could do that, but I can't. And so like supply chain issues don't give us like the green light to end the lives of people who are suffering and who need help. So in that case, again, there are so many pregnancy resource centers that provide those free things for women. And I've seen these women in these communities that are having shortages, like mothers who have been like pumping their breast milk and selling their breast milk. Like it would be formula basically to help these other moms, or even like giving it away to help these other moms that are needing formula or different things like that. And so as a community, yes, we can step up and try to make a difference in these things. But again, there's not really much pro-lifers can do with the supply chain issue. But that still doesn't give us the right to end the lives of people who need help. So there's that. And then what was the other point that she made? I was going to say something.
She said something about if, she can't afford it. She can't afford the medical bills. And then if she comes back, she's going to be prosecuted or something like that.
Yeah, so the prosecution thing is totally inaccurate. Again, like I said, if that was actually true, these corporations wouldn't be paying for women to go travel and get abortions. It's totally, totally untrue. And in that case, the only people who would be penalized is if an abortionist performs an abortion in a state where it would be illegal or unlawful to do so. And then what was the other thing she said? I'm so sorry. I was totally focused on that second point. But what was the other thing you asked?
She said something about like if you can't, I can't afford to pay the medical bills.
Oh, right.
And,
so there are other alternatives to that. Like for an example, like home births, that's like something that's really cool and it's a lot cheaper to do than have a hospital birth. There's that. But also, again, there are these communities and these pregnancy resource centers and different support groups that will help mothers afford giving birth or afford raising a child and different things like that. So again, I don't think like being short or lack of finances is ever a reason to end the life of an innocent child. But also like I feel like a lot of people are not willing to ask for help. And that's like a lot of the issues that we have is that there are so many people who are willing to provide support for these women, but they're too afraid to ask for help. And like we need to kind of create this culture of like, it's okay to ask for help when you need help type deal. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I guess I'm just, and also for anybody in the chat, like click the link in the description. You'll have a link in the comment that I just pinned. There's a link and you'll be able to join the conversation and share your 2 cents as well. So if you want to hop in and join the conversation, feel free to do that. But I think the biggest issue is when it comes to this is not that I don't think that people have thought it all the way through. I don't think that people realize this is a person. And I think if it's not a person, if this was not a person, it wouldn't be a problem. The A word would not be a problem. But it is because it is a person. And then I think the place that you take someone logically is to go from, okay, why do you say it's not a person? And then show them biologically. And if they can understand that and you have the same foundation, morally, then you can go from there. But if there's no, from the conversations you've had, does it seem like most people don't understand that? Or does it seem like it's just a willingness, like a willful ignorance to like, I don't want to accept that it's a person. and I don't care what you say. I'm gonna think this anyway. I don't care. Like,
Yeah, I've actually heard a bit of both. I've heard some people who are willfully ignorant, but I've also heard people who genuinely don't know or they've just been misinformed. Because again, there is so much misinformation out there on, when human life begins. But the scientific consensus is that, at fertilization with the embryo's conception, that is when a new individual, unique human being is created. That is like what most scientists can agree on and all embryologists can agree on is that life does begin at conception. And so there's a lot of people who choose to be ignorant. They're like, oh, well, it's less developed, so it's less valuable. But no, again, they're called human rights. They're not called, adult person rights or like child rights. It's human rights. So that if you're a part of the human race, if you are a human being, you deserve to have these human rights as well. It's not subject to just one, specific group of people. And we can see all throughout history when someone tried to target a specific group of people and was like, oh, you guys aren't in this category of personhood, which is what I hear a lot is that, oh, a fetus isn't a person, so therefore we can end their life because, they can't feel anything or yada, yada, yada. Throughout all of history, we've seen where people, dehumanize a group of people or call them, less than or that they don't deserve life. Like we've seen how terribly that has ended. And we're seeing that happening again now with the topic of abortion. And like, I think that, if we're gonna talk about human rights and talk about, abortion is a human right, we have to talk about what human rights are in the first place, right? We receive human rights because of our humanity, and there's nothing else to it. You don't have to add anything or take away anything. If you are a human being, you are deserving of human rights. So I think a lot of people misunderstand first off what human rights are, and second off science.
So we have a guest that just requested to join, so we're gonna bring him on real quick. We've got James.
Oh, hey, James.
Hi. What's up?
Where are you calling him from?
I'm in Colorado.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing you two know each other.
We've done debates before together.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so to speak. First off, yeah, I think everything y'all are saying is great. And I think, I've seen Maya's stuff before. She definitely knows what she's talking about. I just wanted to add, like, I think, just like she was saying, I think we misunderstand, our rights. One thing that I've had a lot of conversation about with people is like, is the difference between people always bring up like separation of church and state, right? And I try to make the point. I try to help people realize that like there's a difference between someone who's a Christian, like that's in politics, right, making a decision, and the church rising up as a whole to make a decision against the state or against the government, And so like, I don't think there's anything wrong either from coming from a Christian perspective or coming from a biblical standpoint to say, hey, God gives us value at conception, or God gives us value before he even knew us, before he even created us. Not before he knew us, but, before he created us. And so therefore I think it's wrong to take a life that God gives value. Like that's totally different than the church gathering as a whole and saying we're going to oppose the government. That's different than like a Christian saying, hey, I believe abortion is wrong and this is why. And I see a lot of flack coming out of other Christians and coming out of other politicians, saying, oh, you need to leave your religious beliefs behind. You can't force your religious beliefs on people. It's like, I because separation of church and state, I'm like, I hear where you're coming from, and you may not like or agree with why I'm making the decision I'm making or why I support what I support, but like, it's not the same as what you're relating it to. What you think I'm doing is not actually what I'm doing. And at the end of the day, like I have the right as an American freely to make that decision based on my biblical principles, right? With religious freedom. And so, I don't know, I kind of just wanted to add that because that's one thing that I've had a lot of conversation about with other people, and I've seen people attack people for, is that very thing of, oh, separation of church and state, or oh, you can't force religious beliefs on people. So I surely have the right to make a decision and say, hey, the overturning of Roe versus Wade is good because God says that, God gives us life, God gives us value, and who are we to take away something that God has created or God has given value to? So,
Absolutely.
So you think it's a good thing or a bad thing Roe v. Wade was overturned?
oh no, I think it's a good thing that it's overturned. right? Like I believe that because God gives us life, God gives us value, that no one has the right to take that away from anyone. I believe that abortion is wrong because, as Maya said, right, like you're killing a life. You're taking it upon your own authority to take away something that an authority higher than ours has created, and you're now reversing the roles of authority in creation, and you're undermining the authority of the one that created you and loves you. And why would you do that? You know, who are we to do that to God and to another human being that He created?
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
And even on like the perspective of if we're looking at it from a constitutional point of view, like I feel like I've seen so many videos of people talking about how, keep your religion out of it, like keep this out of it. The Supreme Court justices who voted to overturn Roe v. Wade weren't voting based off their biblical principles. They were
Right.
literally just interpreting what was in the Constitution. And so when I hear people who are like, oh, you're only pro-life because of, what you believe, like obviously, yes, I believe that we're all created in God's image, and it is so morally wrong to destroy what God has created and called his own. But also, from a standpoint of like, abortion isn't a constitutional right. In any civilized society, like we cannot allow for the killing of millions of innocent children. Like we can't do that in any civilized society. Like we cannot say that that is morally acceptable. And so, yeah, I fully agree with what you were saying, James. And there's like so much more to it as well. Like not only on the perspective of like looking at it from a biblical point of view, but also looking at it, in the terms of a political point of view. Like I feel like there are so many people who are using this as a political talking point, like on the left and the right for sure. Like the left has been using it to get votes, and then the right has been using the pro-life side to get votes. But I'm just so glad that the Supreme Court decided, we're not going to just cave to what the people want and to what the popular opinion is. We're actually going to do what's right,
Oh yeah, I think even just for the sake of the freedom and the liberty and the peace of our own nation, right? It's a good thing that this was ruled out. And just like you said, like constitutionally, it's not constitutional. It's just not. It doesn't align with the basic fundamentals of what our country was founded on. And how could we allow something to continue like that? That's just not logically consistent. It's not. It doesn't add up. You can't set up, establish, and support something to continue and persevere on a basis that contradicts what our country was founded on. It doesn't work like that.
The thing I don't understand about it, though, about that argument about like, well, everyone's not Christian, so it doesn't matter. Like, it has nothing to do with being Christian. It has everything to do with like, okay, what if someone says, well, I'm not Christian, so I don't believe the whole murder thing. I don't believe that stealing's wrong, so I should be able to steal. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you believe. Like if you don't believe it or not, that's not. We're not allowing it. I honestly think, and it may sound great. I think we've been too nice about it in terms of the argument. Like, I think sometimes we're a little too like, yeah. So I understand. It's like, no, we're not going to allow that. We're not that society.
Right.
I don't care how emotional you feel about this topic. We're not going to say you're just allowed to steal. We're not going to say you're just allowed to kill. We're not going to say you're just allowed to murder babies. If, especially if it's just a situation where it's like, oh, well, I've always dreamed of going to college single and without a baby, and so it's an inconvenience to me. No, you don't get to do that. Like I think that sometimes people on the pro-life side, like I said, have been so like just sweet and nice about it. And it's like, I understand trying to be kind to the person, but the argument is so idiotic and emotional.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense. And it's the most the people who seem to be very against like I'm not your religion, so I don't have to follow this. Like I saw a video where some guy was talking about the sky fairies are going to be happy with you now because you're against abortion or whatever. And it's like your argument for why abortion should be there is completely emotional.
It's very
not
irrational.
It's purely emotional. Well, how would you feel if you were a 12-year-old girl that had to give birth? It's like, it would suck. But just because I feel for that person doesn't mean I'm going to say, okay, they should be allowed to kill somebody. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, especially in the sense of when it comes down to these people who are using their one argument that they have to try to validate why abortion should be legal for every single reason. You know, and that's one thing that really like bothers me a lot about the pro abortion side of things is that they don't think rationally and think about, you know, practical, like the practical things. They really like to highlight these like really tough circumstances. And I'm like, yes, those things are very sad. And we obviously need to be there for people who are going through those things. But also, we cannot use these reasons to say why, you know, abortion should be legal for all reasons, you know? And so I feel like it's just become very irrational and it's very emotional. And rather than, you know, people doing research about, they've just decided, oh, you know, like pro-lifers bad, you know, like this is good, you know, but they don't actually like have a reason as to why they believe what they believe. Like, I feel like there's just so much inconsistency when it comes to the, you know, I'm going to say the A word because I know you were trying not to say it because of like boosting reasons or whatever. But like, you know, when it comes to, there's just so much inconsistency that I hear all the time. And especially when I'm debating and just when I'm having conversations, it's like they never can agree on like one thing.
Well, you have to have logical consistency. Like you have to be, you can't just, if your argument is gonna hold any weight to anyone who has a rational mind, you can't just throw out slogans for your argument. You can't just say, my body, my choice. I believe this, my body, my choice. Like you have to come up with an argument that makes sense. And I think that the thing is that even that slogan doesn't make sense. It's not your body. When the baby is born, is it still your body? You know, I saw a video the other day that was talking about, or today that was talking about if you live in an apartment, you know, like, is that apartment, are you the apartments? Are you the apartments? You know, are you part of the apartment? No.
Right.
It's a child in your body. It is not your body. And then they'll say, oh, well, it's like a parasite, so it's my body. Okay, a tick is a parasite. Is a tick your body? If I grab the tick and pull the tick off, you can say, oh, you grabbed my body. No, because it's not part of your body. Right. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. I just, illogical stuff like that, especially at the risk of other people being affected, really irks me. And I really get passionate about it because it's like, if you're going to make a decision that affects people's life, like living, not standard of living, not, oh, well, they didn't get the same education as so-and-so. No, literally living, being alive, you better come up with a more logical argument than my body, my choice.
Even the argument that was presented to the Supreme Court was such a weak argument. Like, I've heard so many better arguments, and they were talking about, you know, how it's a woman's right, but they weren't really going into detail about like why it's a woman's right or why a woman should be able to have. And I feel like now with all of the science that we have and all the technology that we have, we can see that a child in the womb is alive and is a completely separate human being from its mother. Yes, the baby is growing inside of the mother, but they're not the same, you know, just like you were saying before. And like, you know, with the science and technology, obviously as things advance, we can see, you know, babies can live outside of the womb at earlier times, right? And so I just think that it's so important that we stay consistent, like with what's going on, not only like in science, but just like looking at, you know, like what life in the womb is, you know, like it's not just this, oh, you know, it's just like a parasite, we can just get rid of it, it's no big deal. Like, no, that is a human being, that is a uniquely developing human being that was created by its mother and its father, and it is valuable, and it is deserving of life. And so I feel like it's so important that we stay consistent with our argument, especially as pro-lifers. Like, it's so important that we stay consistent and don't try to like contradict ourselves in this way. And that's one thing that I'm really proud that the pro-life movement has been doing pretty well, in the sense of like sticking to our arguments. Yes, obviously we disagree in some areas, but I feel like on the pro-abortion side of things, we see a lot of like, they cannot agree when life begins. Like, I've heard, oh, life begins when the baby is born. Oh, life begins, you know, at viability. Life begins when the baby has a heartbeat. okay, like, no, let's actually discuss when does life begin. And I feel like
Mhm.
the pro-life movement has been really consistent with that, whereas the pro-abortion side, they definitely don't have science on their team right now.
Because it's like someone trying to argue that, sorry if I offend somebody, but it's like someone trying to argue about like men and women are just, they're the same, and a man could say he's a woman, and a woman could say he's a man. It doesn't make any sense. And so you got to come up with new definitions. You got to constantly come up with, oh, well, now let's say life starts right here. There's no consistency because it doesn't make sense. So, of course, as you're saying, like, the side that is true, the side that is right, is the one that's going to be, that one's going to seem like it makes more sense. It's going to be easy to all be on one page because it actually, there's truth to it. But, look at the transgender thing. There is no consistency there because it's not true.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, the argument itself doesn't make sense. And just for anybody watching, I'm not making fun of or attacking the people who believe this lie. I'm attacking the lie. So I'm saying this lie doesn't make sense. There's no logical sense for it. And, I would be not doing what I think is right to be taking it easy on that lie, on that argument, and not making it look as stupid as it is.
Well, one of the main issues is too, like a lot of times when we find something that we feel like we want to believe, right? And a lot of people are saying it's wrong. There's a part of us there's a part of us that knows that thing that we believe is probably wrong. But what we do, what I've seen from experience, just and believe, I used to be pro-choice just because that was the environment that I was in, and I started thinking logically and rationally. But what happens is we let go of all logic, we let go of all rationality, and we start building up something that works with the worldview that society has given us, that's more compliable with what the rest of society believes or what most of the media is portraying, so that we can feel like we're doing the right and loving thing. And then we build walls to anything in our mind that contradicts that, so that we can feel justified in having that irrational and illogical belief. Because it makes us feel good, and it makes us feel like we're treating people with love, because the media is telling us that if we disagree with any of these things, then we're being hateful bigots. And so anytime someone contradicts that belief, then you believe and you look at them as the fact that they're a hateful bigot or just intolerant, right? And that's not the truth. That's totally not the truth. When you think rationally and logically, the men and woman argument, the whole we don't know how to define what a woman is doesn't make sense, and the whole A word. Sorry, I didn't say that earlier. I didn't realize you're trying to avoid it. But
It's not good.
the whole A word argument, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Just like you said, like there's literally no logical explanation for, like, if you really sit down and think about it and say, okay, so these are the consequences. This is what, it looks like. These are the statistics for this, blah, blah, blah. There's no logical or rational conclusion you can come to and saying that the A word is good or approving of it. You can't come rationally to the conclusion that it is good when you look at the facts, when you look at what it does to a woman, when you look at what it puts her through, and even just to touch on the whole, like, what is a woman thing, right? It's like, I've heard a lot of people that advocate for that. And it's like, well, you're telling me you can't define what a woman is, so you're going to choose to be a woman if you feel like a woman. Well, what exactly is it that you're saying you identify as? What exactly is that thing, right? So, like, let's say I'm a male, and I'm going to tell you that I feel like I'm a woman, but I can't define to you what a woman is. So if you ask me what I'm identifying as, I really can't tell you. So at that point, I'm just non-binary, really. I'm really just nothing. The whole non-binary thing doesn't make sense to me either, because you're just literally saying you're nothing. You're not male, you're not female. Well, what are you? And so none of these things are rational. None of them are logical. And I do think we need to speak to people and love about these things, but there's nothing wrong with being firm about the truth and letting people know, hey, like, you're living in a lie. And it's not just that I want to be a policeman and walk around telling you how to live or how to think, but you're actually hurting yourself, and you're actually hurting the people around you, because you're doing things to your own body, to your own self, and believing things about your own body that are going to cause harm to you. And then you're spreading this misinformation to other people that are going to apply it to their own lives and possibly cause harm to themselves or the people around them. And it's a cancer. It's a cancer that we don't have to be shy from wanting to stop. We shouldn't have to be weak and cowardly so that people will approve of us and our approach of trying to put a stop to these lies and these cancers to our society.
Yeah, and if you love someone, you'll tell them the truth, because truth sets people free, And so, regardless on if you're a Christian or not, you can see that happening around the world, where people are getting free from from this bondage that they're living in, And I've seen so many different like testimonies and different things, and even seen it personally myself. Like, I had the opportunity to go do some man on the street interviews in downtown Colorado Springs, and it's pretty like pro-abortion. And so I was walking around doing some interviews, and basically what those look like is like, I'll just ask them questions about what they think about the A word. And then I'll show them a video of how the procedure works, and then I get their reaction to the video. And it's really honestly cool to see how people respond when they didn't know what it was before, and then they see the video, and after, their opinion changes or they believe something different about it, because the truth has set them free from this belief or this lie that they've been, believing in for so long. And so it was really cool, because I got to see this girl who came in who is super pro-abortion, very, very like, oh yeah, it's a woman's choice, blah, 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 blah. I showed her the video, and she was like, I'm so, like, I didn't know this, and I feel like everybody should see this. And again, just goes to show, like, the truth does set people free. And, as pro-life people, and as Christians, and as conservatives, and, whatever you want to call yourself, I'm a Jesus follower. That's the main thing that I am. That is like, we need to be telling the truth to people, because truth in love is what's going to set them free. And I think what a lot of Christians and just people in general forget is that, like, that they think that, oh no, we just have to love people. And in that, we just love them, but we don't actually tell them the truth. But again, if you really do love someone, you will tell them the truth.
I got a question for the group. So what do you guys say to Christians who say they're not really for abortion, but they kind of believe that it should be the woman's choice, and that at the end of the day, you should just let God handle it?
Okay, yeah. So this is a good thing. I've dealt with this a lot. And I see a lot of hate from Christians, that I see a lot of hate from Christians towards other Christians, from pro-life Christians towards Christians that are kind of pro-choice to an extent, right? You have those people, like, for instance, like literally just yesterday, I saw a TikTok from this guy who was like, I'm a pastor, right? He started the video off by saying, I'm a pastor, right? In order to convince people that what he was saying was right. And then he was like, so maybe you should kind of like consider what I'm actually saying, because I've studied blah, blah, blah. He was like, I believe God is the God of pro-life, yes, but he's also the God of pro-choice, because he loves us enough to let us have a choice, blah, blah, blah. I wish I could sit down and have a conversation with that man, because I would love to kindly and gently, right, just to explain to him in a loving way that, like, hey, look, I understand where you're coming from, and I get it, right? Just like you said, like, I know a lot of times we come off as soft or whatever, but from one Christian to another, I do understand, like, actually where he's coming from. I'm not saying that to appeal to him, or I say because I actually get it. I used to be on that side of Christianity of, oh, I don't believe in it, but I believe we should let people have a choice because that's what the loving thing would do. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that if I believe it's wrong, it's very contradictory and even hypocritical to tell someone that it's okay to do the thing that I believe is wrong. And so I wish I could sit down and have a conversation with them and be like, man, look, I get it. I know where you're coming from. I've been there. But, if you believe that being pro-life is the right thing, that the A word is wrong, how can you lovingly, caring, in a caring manner, with all the love you have in your heart for that person across from you, especially as a pastor, say, hey, I believe this is wrong, but if you're going to do it, I can't control you. That may be the thing that God wants you to do. How can you, from a biblical perspective, from from a pastoral perspective, look at that person with all the love in your eyes that you can and say, I support what you're doing. You know, I mean, Jesus sat and ate with sinners, right? But not to approve of what they were doing, but because he was going to change them. You know, the sinners that sat down with him rose up from the table changed, right? So as people, as Christians, when we look at other Christians who believe in this, we should have conversations with them. I believe we should be gentle. And when they stand up from our table, when they stand up from our conversation, we should be believing and hoping for the fact that they would be changed, that their minds would be changed about what they believe. But even if they don't, I think we shouldn't be hating them. We shouldn't be treating them with condemnation or judgment and saying they're not Christians. Because I used to be there. And I know there's people who looked at me and thought that I wasn't a real Christian. No, despite my devotion to God in so many different areas, except for this one that I was a little bit misled on. You know, people would look at that one tiny area and go, "Oh, well, you're not a Christian. You must not be saved. You've been misled." And you know, that goes against every idea of God's grace. That goes against the fundamentals, the basics of our faith. How can you look at someone and judge them for the, you know, one small part of their life and say that they're not saved? And so anyways, I'm kind of going off into, you know, a sermon now at this point, but just
that's
to
good.
just to stay on track with the, you know, with the whole A word, the idea and pro-choice idea, I think that if there's a Christian that is pro-choice, at me as a Christian, I'm not going to just initially off the bat with my presumptuous fleshly desire say that they are evil, they're wicked, they're not saved, and they're misled. You know, maybe they have been misinformed, but maybe they have been saved and they choose to have a different perspective despite what scripture says. And they might even use certain scriptures to justify what they believe because they feel like that's the loving thing. You know, I believe that they're wrong. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, well, maybe that's God telling you you're right. It's not, right? I think that God definitely does not want us taking innocent lives, that he gives worth and value. But definitely let's not look at Christians with hate. Let's not look at those other Christians with judgment, and be understanding and gentle. I think there's one verse that I was really actually thinking about today. And I don't remember the exact location of it, but it says, you know, when you speak to your opponents, speak to them with gentleness, but speak to them with the truth in hopes that one day God would lead them to repentance and a knowledge of the truth. And I think that is how we should be treating people, but we're so caught up in this political mindset and the societal mindset of if someone disagrees with us, we have to call them out, we have to be rude to them, and we have to just jump on them and make them feel ashamed for what they believe. And even Christians are taking a hold of this. It's taking a foothold in the church. It's taking a foothold in pastors behind the pulpit. And it's toxic and it's unbiblical, I believe.
What about you, Maya?
Yeah, for sure. So again, like, you know, the truth sets people free. And I always look at it this way, like abortion in itself is demonic. Like it really is. There's nothing else that I can say about it, like to another Christian. Like, I don't know how you could look at that and not see that because, you know, looking all throughout the Bible, looking at, you know, before Moses came, you know, when I guess he would be like the messenger or the deliverer, I guess he was called the deliverer, you know, right before the deliverer came, Pharaoh tried to kill all of the sons, right? I don't know if I'm getting that story perfectly accurate, but then again, you know, when Jesus came and when the Messiah came, again, like King Herod tried to go kill all of like the firstborn sons or kill all of the sons under like a certain age, you know? And so I feel like in itself, like it is demonic. Like think about how many deliverers we could have had here on this earth that aren't here now because of abortion and because of, you know, a woman's right to choose. And so, and I say that with quotations because, you know, obviously I disagree with it, but I think that, you know, we see these examples in the Bible where these kings and these leaders tried to end the life of these children. You know, the Lord always came through, but at the same time, like that spirit in itself is demonic, like to end the lives of children, you know, it really is. And if we look at it from that perspective of like seeing it through a biblical lens of like, we are created in God's image, you know, we as humans are, so we are not allowed to destroy God, like what God has created in his image, you know, and it like goes to say, you know, God, like he knew us before we were even born, like when we were in our mother's womb, like he knew us and he has a purpose for us. And so I think, you know, abortion itself is demonic. And so I'd honestly just like, when I come across Christian pro-choicers, I honestly just ask them like why they believe what they believe, because I like to hear why. And a lot of them just don't really know enough about it. And I find out like that is mostly true. A lot of people don't know, or they have like this idea of like, God cares more about women than about babies, which is like something that I hear a lot. But I think that we obviously need to approach it in a way as like, we see human life as valuable because it's created in God's image. So we need to protect and defend human life because obviously like we are God's image bearers. So we need to like stand up for each other.
And then I think when I have these conversations with people one-on-one, it's different than when I'm having these conversations right now.
Mm-hmm.
When the argument is just in the air and it's just an idea, it's an evil idea. I'm going to make that idea. I'm going to try to make that idea look as unappealing as possible. When I'm talking to a person who has that idea latched onto them, I'm going to try to make them view that idea as unappealing as possible as well. What I'm not going to do is say that person is now, like you said, they're condemned or whatever. But what I can't do is ignore the fact that it's there. Like, if I'm a doctor and I know that there is, cancer on your neck, I'm going to be less worried about like how you feel at the fact that I pointed out. Like, I'm not going to try to make you feel bad. I'm not going to be like, hey, you've got a big lump on your neck. You look like an idiot. I'm not going to do something like that. But I need to let them know that it's there. And so I agree with you 100% that it needs to be done in love and in gentleness, which is what the Bible says. The only thing is, I would ask Christians who believe that, who say, well, I wouldn't do it because I know it's wrong, but I'm not going to force it on other people. I would ask them this. I would say, if you spoke to a white Southern person back in, the early years of the country, right, where there's slavery, and a person's a Christian, and there's these abolitionists that are trying to abolish the right to own slaves.
Yeah.
And then someone asks them and says, hey, you're a Christian, you're a believer, right? And they're like, yeah. I wouldn't own a slave, but I don't want to force that on someone else. I would really question how they got to that train of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I would say, okay, how did you come to that conclusion? I had a conversation with somebody about this like 2 days or a day after Roe v. Wade, a friend of mine, and I laid out the facts, but I asked him, how did you come to this conclusion? Because I think the conclusion is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I don't think it's right at all. I think your conclusion is completely wrong, but I want you to explain it because I'm not God. You may explain something to me that I haven't thought of. And then now I'm open to, okay, wow, maybe you were right. But if it is an emotional, non-logical, an argument that, Hollywood and politics pushed into you because you've been around this group, that's not a good enough answer for me to say, yeah, that's what God would want you to do. I'd have to say, okay, dude, you're wrong. And now, obviously, like you said, I'm not just going to come out and say, you're wrong, man. But if they're going to ask me like, hey, yeah, I think I would definitely, if they say, oh, I think that people should be able to do it, I wouldn't do it. I would question them on that. I would challenge them on that and say, okay, in what other reality are you okay with people doing this when you know it's wrong, when you're saying it's wrong? In what other reality are you okay with that, especially when it comes to murdering someone, killing someone? And I think when it comes to Christians, C-Love, to answer your question, I think most Christians don't understand the biology aspect. I don't think they fully understand that it is a fully functional person in that stage that it's at, functional for that stage. I don't think they understand that. I think that they think that it's and I don't think they understand how abortions are done. I used to think that abortion's done. A woman goes, they kind of maybe put some sort of like gel in there or something, and then and then the baby's just magically gone. I didn't know until I started seeing like, oh, have you heard of partial birth abortion? They keep the head in there so no one will be able to hear the baby scream in pain while you're decapitating it. Like, if you know that and you know that's a person, I have a hard time. I have a hard time understanding how you can see that as okay if you believe that everybody is made in the image of God. I think now I said I think that the main thing is they just don't know. I think that's what a lot of it is.
I think that's a good point, Zach. A lot of them really don't know, because I've had these debates with other Christians, and to be honest, they just don't know that the baby is actually like a real, fully, like, it's a human. Like, they don't realize it at that point. Like, they just think, like you said, it's just kind of just some little thing that's in there, and then they probably just drink some juice and the baby's gone. But yeah, I think that's a good point. The biology of it, they just really don't understand.
Yeah, for sure. Also, like, adding on to that, a lot of, like, one of the arguments that I like to use in the sense of like, oh, like, I personally wouldn't have an abortion, but I'm not going to stop other people from getting abortions, because that's mainly what like pro-choice Christians believe is like, they're like, oh, I personally would never do that, but like, if anyone else wants to do that, because free will. I'm like, okay, so in this case of like, let's say you have a child and you're like, oh, I personally wouldn't abuse my child, but if someone else wants to abuse their child, they can go for it. No, if something is morally wrong, it's morally wrong regardless on who's doing it, and we have to stand up for what is right. And like in the Bible, it literally says like it's better for you to tie a millstone around your neck and throw yourself into the depths and be thrown into the depths of the sea than it is to harm or offend a little one, right? And so like in this case of like these Christians who are pro-choice, I feel like they just misinterpret what the Bible has to say. They misunderstand a lot of the biology as well. But mainly, like, I see a lot of Christians who use like Genesis 2:7 as their argument, which is like God breathed breath into man and man became a living flesh. So they're like, a baby is human, or it counts as like a human being when it's born because it takes its first breath. But what they don't take into consideration is like context of the word. Like Genesis 2:7 is specifically talking about Adam, who was the first man who was not conceived in the womb of his mother. So like, I feel like there's just a lot of miscommunication and like misunderstanding, and like we need to be standing up for what is morally right. So obviously, yes, we need to be calling people out, like other Christians who are misleading other people and like who are being misled themselves, obviously doing it in love, but also like doing it in a way where we are unapologetic about the truth. And I feel like a lot of Christians in this day and age are like, oh, if this offends you, I'm sorry, but like this is what I believe, but if you don't believe it, that's okay. No, like we need to be sharing the truth unapologetically, but also doing it in love.
Doing it gently. Yeah, you're right. Doing it gently, doing it in love. And if anyone ever, I have never heard anyone say that Genesis 2 thing. And if I ever heard anyone say that, I would destroy their argument. Like, so it would be like, yes, please say that. Like, that would be like a home run out of the park. Like that. But obviously, they haven't read Leviticus, Deuteronomy, where it talks about life is in the blood of an animal. That's why you don't drink, and that's why, different. Jesus talked about his blood being shed, and blood having to be shed at sacrifices, and blood having to be shed for sin, and so anyway, all that, and the heartbeat starts way before the first breath, so there's already blood, child, if you want to get specific like that. But I think that I think there is definitely a balance, James, in terms of like, we need to be graceful. We need to be peaceful when we talk to people about these things, whether they're believers or not, and share the truth in love because we love them. And I think that's only done through the Holy Spirit. But
what I will say too is I do agree with you that it is important to stand firm in the truth too, especially in today's day and age, and in a society and really a world, right? It goes beyond just America, but we live in a world where everybody wants to make everything ambiguous and relative, including scripture. And I've had this happen in churches. I've been a part of a church that, you know, every time I brought up a scripture that was about a certain topic, and I was like, how come we're not practicing this in the church? How come we're not adhering to this? You know, why is this going on? Even scripture says, why is this going on in your church? Even though scripture says this, you know, they make it very ambiguous and very relative to personal belief. And it's like, well, you know, is God really so legalistic about this and that and this and that? It's like, well, you know, if I am born again, if I've been regenerated and impacted by the Holy Spirit, and I believe that his word is true, that means that, you know, Paul Washer says something really great. He says, that means that I've realized that I've been wrong about everything in my life. And my goal now, if I love God, if I desire to love him and live for him, is to conform to his image. So is it really legalistic to say, hey, God, you know, how do I talk to people in this area of my life? How should we, how should we be orderly in the church, right? According to your word, what does your word say about how I should act, speak, think, and do in this area of my life? Is that really so legalistic to conform to his image and his word? If my heart's been regenerated, if I love him, if I've realized I've been wrong about everything in my life up until the point of being saved, why would I then go to something else other than scripture to learn how to be new again? You know, how to be new and how to live life in him. And so I see people doing that even with, you know, relativity and subjectivity and ambiguity plays such a big role, and these political ideas too, you know, and being pro-choice or pro-life. You know, people are like, well, it really just comes down to what you believe and your personal beliefs and this and that. It's like, well, if that were the case, then, you know, like, forgive me for saying this, you know, this might not boost views, but if that were the case,
Well, then no, you can't say it.
okay, well, I'll try to avoid it. But if that were the case, then, you know, things that were, I'll put it like this, things that happened in history that we say were bad, and, you know, these large figures that did really bad things to a certain group of people that, you know, was very bad. I think we know who I'm talking about, right? Like, if that were the case, then what he did to all those people was okay. And you can't tell me that I'm wrong because it's all just down to personal belief. Now, we know that what he did was wrong because we have an objective standard, right? And so when it comes to being pro-choice, right, like, if it's all just down to personal belief, then you also can't judge me for being pro-life because it's all relative, right? It's all relative, isn't it? You know, but it's not. It's not relative. It's not ambiguous. It's not diluted to nothingness, to meaninglessness. There is meaning and purpose behind everything we do. And if we recognize that, then we can't just dilute everything to meaninglessness, you know, in order to justify our personal beliefs. We have to be objective and not be afraid to be objective in a society that wants to try to dilute everything so that it fits their personal beliefs. Because the issue is, people think that if you disagree with them, then you hate them and you're just an intolerant bigot. And that's not the truth. Right? Just like Maya was saying earlier, if I love you, I'm going to speak the truth to you, right? And if that means that I have to tell you that being pro-choice is wrong, and if you say that you're against it, you also can't advocate for it, right? If that means I have to tell you that, then that's what that means. I don't think we should shy away and be cowardly. I think, you know, yes, be gentle and loving and kind when we speak these things, but you know, I also think, I do believe that it's okay to stand firm in what we believe and not be afraid of the judgment of other people. And my answer to you about, you know, like the Christians that are shy about these things, I think that's why we're shy about these things, is because a lot, as Christians, we say, okay, I want to be like Jesus. I want to be loving. And so I don't want to act or say anything in a way that maybe might offend someone, because then they're going to look at me like a bigot. Then they're going to say that I'm hateful. It's like, well, you know, one thing that John MacArthur says, I believe is really good, is when you're preaching Jesus, you can't avoid the hostility of the world, right? You can't avoid the hostility of unbelievers. And that even comes to biblical beliefs, right? So believing, being pro-life, right? I'm not going to avoid people being hostile towards me when I'm talking to them about being pro-life and being against being pro-choice. The hostility is going to come. And so being afraid of judgment is what shies us away of standing for the truth. And we shouldn't let that judgment scare us away. We shouldn't let that judgment turn us into cowards, right? Because who's going to fight for the truth if we all just hide in our bunkers, but because we're scared of this big judgment bomb, right? Who's going to stand up for the truth? Where will the truth go? It's all going to be underground. No one's going to be speaking it. And the affirmation and the approval of the sin of the rest of the world is just going to continue and flourish. And that's not right. That's not okay. We need people that are bold enough to stand up for the truth in a day and age that wants to make truth ambiguous and relative. Because if not, then truth will be gone. No one will believe in truth. There'll be no sense or purpose to anything.
Right.
You made the point about Jesus, and I think it's interesting because Jesus was, full of grace and mercy, but at the same time, this is the same Jesus that walked into the temple courts and saw people trading and selling and started flipping tables, right? So he had that side of him too, and I think that Christians need to realize they need to tap into that side as well.
Yeah.
Stand up, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's important because I just think we've gotten too soft. Like in a lot of ways is where like, Jesus would have been flipping tables over a lot of things that we're allowing to happen in the church and a lot of things that are being taught behind the pulpit. And so like I totally believe like the church should be the forefront of this movement of like spreading truth. Like the church, I mean, like even in the beginning, in the days, like early days of our country, like the church was the one who started, abolishing slavery and started spreading the truth in that area about how, all men are created equal in God's eyes. And it's really interesting, like if you do some research on that about how the church was like the forefront of like all of these huge movements that were like big for human rights. And I really do believe that the church has just gotten like quiet about things that they should be loud about. And it's so important that as believers, like even if, in the pro-life sense, like even if you're not trying to like preach the gospel to them, but in a way where we're still spreading the love of God to them through what we're sharing and how we're saying it and different things like that, but also at the same time not being afraid to stand up for truth and flip tables if we need to.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I appreciate about people like you and James and even those the Zubies and people like that may be on this side of the argument when it comes to abortion is, at least from my perspective, for so many years, for a long time, it's always seemed like the atheistic worldview was the one that was more logical and they had more facts and everything like that. But the deeper you get into it, it seems like it really has no like real logical foundation in a lot of these arguments. And people like I said, like yourself or the Ben Shapiros or people like that have really been able to take this topic in particular and say, okay, if we're gonna be logical people, forget about whether you believe my religion or not. If we're going to be logical, we have to recognize certain things. We can't ignore those things. And when they do that and bring that into the conversation to where it's like forcing you to address this is what's actually going on, I just really appreciate that because it shows that the side of truth and the side that God is on in arguments, in different things, especially like this in particular, which I don't think is very gray at all, is not the side that has the weaker argument. It's the side that has the most logic and the strongest argument to it. Yeah. And for so many decades, I feel as though, from my perspective, it seemed as if the other side with topics like this one had more of like a scientific backing. You know what I mean? Like they had more facts behind them, and it's just not the case. And I one of my favorite stories in the Bible was when Elijah is on the mountain with the prophets of Baal, and there are these prophets worshiping to this other God. So they made a bet. For anyone who doesn't know, like they made an agreement. Hey, children of Israel, God's chosen people. If this God is the real God, the God Baal is the real God, and he does a miracle right here, we're going to all worship him. If the one true God that I worship is the real one, then we're going to worship him. So let them do their thing, and then I'm going to do mine, and I'll show that God, whoever's altar burns with fire spontaneously, that's whose God is real. And he literally put it to the test. And he said, I believe in the real one. Like, God is as real as gravity. So I trust that so much that, okay, you don't believe it? Then do your thing. And then these prophets started doing their chants, and they started cutting themselves. And he made fun of the fact that they were doing that. He said, maybe your God can't hear you. Maybe he's gone to the bathroom. Maybe he's asleep. Try yelling a little louder so you can wake him up. And then when he prayed, he's like, God, come down, show your power. Boom, God did it. And I liked the fact that he wasn't so like, well, do I really know if this is the right thing? Do I really know if God's going to come through? Like, he was so sure in the fact that God was on his side, that God was there, and he was so secure in the truth that he could make fun of the fact they were doing that. And so that's how I look at stuff like this. Topics that are very black and white, like this, or what is a woman? Like that kind of stuff, the area that we're getting into that is very ambiguous, like you said. As believers, we need to stop sitting on the sideline and letting the only voice that yells from the rooftop be the one that is the voice of lies. That's the voice of confusion. That's the voice of ambiguity and vagueness. And we need to shout from the rooftops in the areas that are very black and white. No, this is what it is. Mm-hmm. And I think, like you said, like the church has not done that with a lot of these things. And and we've had different conversations as to why, but I really think that we need to step up, and I'm really appreciative for people like you both, that boldly and logically point out the truth.
You know what's interesting? Back then, Zach, they were getting persecuted, killed for their belief, right? Nowadays, we're scared to shout, like you said, from the rooftops, because we might get canceled, or we might get like mean tweets, or you know what I mean? Our post might get taken. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, people back then had real worries, and we're scared to do it because of things like over the internet.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's so true.
I might lose my sponsor.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah, right.
All of these, I've seen like so many people who have just like given up on, speaking the truth because they keep getting banned and censored. I'm like, this is nothing. Like, this is nothing. And it, and it just goes to show like, things are going to get worse. But it's just like, if you really believe that our God is real, like, you're going to say that, like, it's not going to be something you want to keep to yourself. Because again, if you love people, you're going to tell them the truth. And obviously, like, we want to see people in heaven. We want to see souls being won over. And so, like, we should be willing to tell the truth regardless on if our videos get taken out. I've been permanently banned 3 times. I've had over 20 of my videos taken out. And, like, that's not a big deal. Like, it just goes to show that, whatever, like, I'm saying is reaching people, and people are listening, and regardless on if they agree with me or not, like, it's still starting a conversation. And again, like I was saying earlier about, like, the debating and what we were talking about, and, like, pro-life versus pro-choice, like, I don't debate just to win debates, and I don't debate just to prove people wrong, but I do it to get people to think about the topic that I'm talking about and the topic that I'm passionate about. And it's so important that we are speaking the truth, and just, again, doing it unapologetically, regardless on what it is specifically, because there's some people who want to talk about abortion or the A word, and there's some people who don't want to talk about it. And, like, that's okay. But I feel like at the same time, we also need to be standing, on the truth of God's word, and we need to be spreading the word. And there's certain people who are going to talk about different topics, and there's certain people who are anointed to talk about different things. And so it's important, like, as the body of Christ, like, we are coming together, and we are just, like, speaking the truth and doing it just, like, unapologetically. It's the only word I can really feel like using, is, like, we can't be sorry for telling people the truth.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I appreciate is just logic and truth. One thing, as I've grown and I've gotten older, I'm 22 now, right? And I know that's not old, right? I'm still young, but just as I've grown and matured, one thing I've appreciated more and more is logic and truth. And so I try to think about things that way, and I try to explain things that way to other people that may be thinking irrationally, more illogically, and living in a lie. Right? I try to shed that light on people that are living in that darkness. And I noticed that three things will happen, two of which I've seen. The first one that I haven't seen is that someone will actually be convinced and they'll walk away living in the truth, right? And being enlightened and grateful that I spoke the truth to them, or that someone spoke the truth to them. The other two, which I have seen, is someone will at the end of the conversation, they see that you're speaking the truth, but they just don't want to walk away from what they believe because their pride says you'll look like a fool, or you can't just leave behind everything you believed in up until this point. You've believed this for so long, why leave it behind? And so they gently yet pridefully say, hey, I love you, I respect you, but I gotta agree to disagree, right? The third thing, which is the most common thing that I've seen happen, is people will result to calling me uneducated and I don't know what I'm talking about, because they realize that they have no rational or logical evidence to what they're saying, that there is no truth to what they're saying. They realize it's a relative belief that doesn't have any logical foundation to it, with no building blocks that are sensible. And the only thing they can resort to is calling me uneducated and saying I don't know what I'm talking about, even though I could go on for days. I've had people tell me all the time, oh, you're resorting to whataboutisms and you're saying this and that. And I'm like, no, look, all I'm trying to do is use the very logic that you're using to show you how illogical it is. I'm trying to use analogies. I'm trying to speak truth to you to show you that what you're saying, what you're believing is not true. And it's not for the sake of winning an argument. It's not for the sake of me being able to walk away when I set my phone down and going, yes, I beat that guy today, right? Like, there's no point in that. I'm speaking the truth to you because I love you and I want you to know the truth, and I don't want you to live in this lie. And it's not because I hate you. It's not because I'm a bigot. It's the opposite. It's because I love you and I've seen the truth. And why would I want you to live in this lie? I've had to build my way out of these lies. I've had to build my way into thinking logically and realizing the truth and building my life upon these truths. Why would I want to steer someone away from that I see in the same position that I was in? No, I want to be caring enough and generous enough to hand you the ladder that I had to build on my own to climb. You know what I mean? As far as understanding and the truth goes. And I, at the end of the day, right, I can't boast of myself. All the glory goes to God. It's not me who did it, but we do have a personal responsibility of playing out the role that the Holy Spirit empowers us to play out. And I've had to do a lot of thinking objectively, thinking logically, standing on the truth. And I try to hand that out to other people. And those are just the three, those three things will happen, but those latter two are what I've seen the most. They'll just say, oh, I agree to disagree, but I love you. And, we can still have a cool friendship or relationship or whatever. And then the latter one, which I've seen more commonly, is people leave with hatred and they just say, oh, you just don't know what you're talking about and you're stupid and you're uneducated. Obviously you haven't done your research, this and that. Like, I have, but what can I do to convince you? I'm not here to try to convince you. I just want to give you the truth. I want to give you the truth because I love you. And so, yeah.
Right.
And we appreciate you, Maya, for joining us. James, we appreciate you, man. You did awesome, man, contributing to the show, man. We appreciate that.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Appreciate it. It was a blessing.